Hi everyone, my name is Nico Toneff, and in this video we're going to be looking at 5 steps for setting up your team scoreboard at work. If you manage a team, or if you're a project manager, program manager, or a tech lead, you're often chasing people around, trying to get status on things. You may be feeling a little bit overwhelmed, like you've got a lot to do. I feel this as well, especially recently in the last 3 years since COVID. We've been trying to find people digitally and on Zoom all the time. It can be difficult to know if what we're doing is making a difference. And this is exactly where I feel the scoreboard for your team can come in. So the 5 steps we're going to look at today is, firstly, what game are you playing? Secondly, what metric are you going to use? Thirdly, what platform could your scoreboard be on? Fourthly, where are you going to display the scoreboard to your team? And lastly, celebrating and iterating with your team. Your team, believe it or not, is something we call a complex adaptive system. Essentially what that means is your people, when they're together, have a dynamic. And that dynamic is impacted by changes in the environment, like in the organization, and changes on the team itself, like people who come in and off the team. And that dynamic is impacted also by you and your interventions with the team. Think of your own experience on a team you've been on. Have you ever been on a team where maybe there was a change in policy at the company, and then suddenly it went from a very collaborative environment into silos where people are arguing with each other? Or did you ever lose a key player on your team? How did that impact you? How did that impact the team dynamics? So these kinds of things can be very difficult to manage by looking and fixing all the different pieces or the people themselves. So what can we do about this? Well, there's a lot we could do, but today what I'm suggesting is that if your team doesn't have an easy way to see how they're performing as a team in a quantifiable and immediate way, you ought to consider creating them a scoreboard. And that's what we're going to look at. The scoreboard acts as a feedback loop for your team. Just like in professional sports, it's a place where the team can go and look and see how they're performing and if they're winning the game. And in your case, your game is probably the project you're working on, the product you're developing, or some kind of business outcome that you're trying to achieve. When your team has a place to get immediate feedback on how they're performing, they can make course corrections on their own. It's like in professional sports, there's always a place where the players can look up and see, how am I doing? And did that make a difference on the score? No. Okay, what about this? No. Okay, how about this? Oh, hey, that worked. Let's do more of that. So this is how the scoreboard reinforces positive behaviors without you having to even be there. The scoreboard can also be motivating for your team. As they see themselves closing the gap in the game, again, it drives the right behaviors. And it can even help with time management. Most scoreboards have a sense of how much time is left in the game. And if yours does as well, it can help your team to make small decisions in priority and what to spend their time on, again, without your oversight or having to course correct them. And you might be beginning to see how all these things can come together to enable a much more efficient decision-making process than you chasing down each person and trying to point them in the right direction. It's like trying to synchronize the wings of all the birds flying in a particular formation. It's not necessary. As long as they know where they're going and they're course correcting their way there, they'll get there. And what we're really going for here is your team members relating to each other and themselves as performers, as players in a game that really matters, because that's where the magic is and the results will follow. So if that sounds appealing to you, let's get into the steps for setting up your scoreboard. So step 1, what game are we playing? Before we can get really into the implementation of the scoreboard itself, you may have gathered that we're going to have to start thinking about what your team does in the context of what game are they playing and how do they know if they're winning? And those questions might be difficult to answer at first, but a slightly easier set of questions is, what is my team accountable for? And how do we know we're doing a good job? When you have the answers to those questions, that'll at least point you towards the answers to what's your game and what should the scoreboard represent. right, so step 2 is choosing the right metric. So in the context of your game, the scoreboard is going to be one of two things. It's either going to represent a business outcome or a team performance indicator. Now, business outcomes are best. These are things like revenue or subscribers or some other kind of business outcome. Now, the only problem with business outcomes is if your team cannot see a direct correlation between the actions they take and what actually impacts that metric, then this scoreboard will not give them the benefits that I had mentioned. If your team is a little bit abstracted from those kind of business metrics, it's actually okay to use a team performance indicator. So a performance indicator would be things like units shipped or work completed, or some other kind of velocity metric maybe. These kinds of things can be good and useful, but the thing to watch out for here is having things be too abstract and not really meaningful in terms of driving the business results that you need. Step 3 is picking your platform. So right now we are spoiled for choice when it comes to fancy platforms. You've got Jira, Trello, Salesforce. You can even use tools such as Tableau and Power BI to create really fancy dashboards. But I would caution you against getting too complicated here because it can really clutter up your dashboard and it makes the meaning of each metric less impactful and doesn't drive behavior as well. If you can create your scoreboard by tapping into the tools your team already uses day to day, that's probably best. Now, the caution here is it can be seductive to think, well, if everyone just keeps all their tasks up to date, or if I can integrate this system with that system, and it'll all automatically work together and we'll get all these great data points. The problem here is if you create a process that's so complex that it takes months to get your scoreboard up to date, then that's months that your team doesn't have a scoreboard to use. In contrast, I would recommend keeping it simple. You can even use a spreadsheet to capture how your team's performing and create your dashboard that way. And I've actually linked below some example templates that you can use for how to quickly capture your team's performance and create a scoreboard for them today. Step 4 is displaying your scoreboard. Now, I've just got done saying that over-engineering your scoreboard can be a pitfall, but another pitfall is a scoreboard that only updates every month. Your team needs as close to a real-time scoreboard as possible. And if you've already got too much to do, it's unlikely that you're going to update the scoreboard. So it's best if you can actually get the data out of the tool that your team uses right now to get their work done, or nominate somebody who can be responsible for keeping the scoreboard up to date on a regular basis. You also want to think through, how is my team actually going to see the scoreboard? If they have to go to a different website or a different link to see the dashboard, they're not going to do it. So rather than trying to make them do it, you want to put it in a place they can't avoid seeing it. Now, this could be integrating it into your systems in a way where it shows up in their daily work, like in Jira or Confluence or some other kind of integrated way where the scoreboard's always visible. Now, that's not always possible. So another alternative is to bake it into the process that you have with your team. Let's say you have a daily meeting with your team. You might take 5 minutes to look at the dashboard. Let's say you have a regular meeting with the team where you look at how you guys are doing. You might put it into a document, copy and paste from the dashboard into a document, and then there's your scoreboard. It's offline, so it's not as good as real time, but you'll at least see it. Step 5 is celebrate and iterate. Definitely recognize your team's achievements. If they're doing well, don't miss the opportunity to acknowledge them. And like any tool, the scoreboard is going to evolve with your team's needs. So get feedback from the team, and from there, you guys can iterate. And there you have it. The scoreboard is a window to the reality of the game your team is playing. And it's a tool that we really need in a time like now when things have become so complex and you and I have become so abstracted from the results of our actions. The scoreboard is a great way to actually see what difference we're making. Now I'd like to share with you an example of what it might look like to set up a scoreboard for your team. I'm going to use the template that I've linked below. All right, we're now going to look at 3 templates that you could use for your team's scoreboard at work. The first of which could be used as a team performance indicator, and that's the example we're going to go with today. But now we're going to look at the amount of work completed by the team every week. And that's what these numbers here are. It's going to be week 5, week 6. But you could consider this time period days or months or whatever's going to make sense for your team. And in this teal column, this is going to be our metric here. This is, for us, this is going to be work completed in terms of points, but you could easily turn this into a business outcome focused scoreboard by, if you were measuring customer satisfaction every week, and then you could track the customer satisfaction on the same chart. Now, for the example, this is actually real data from a team I worked with in the past, and they were working on a big project that was going to take months. So winning the game for that team meant keeping up with a consistent pace of work, doing as well or hopefully better than we were doing in the past, and without burning the team out. So part of our goal there was keeping a sustainable pace. So I'm just going to update our data here, and let's say it's week 21, and I meet with the team and we discover that we have completed 60 points this previous week 21. So I'm going to enter that data in, and then this column here, all it's doing is creating a rolling average over the last 5 data points. This weights the average to be checking only the most recent data, because we believe that what happened in sprint 3 might not have much impact on what's happening in sprint 23 or week 23. So all you need to do is just drag this cell down here and it will copy and paste the formula and keep it going with the most recent data. And so as I do that, I see that the average work this team is getting done is 56 points worth of work per week. And that helps me to plan for the future. And it shows that, we're still doing better than we were when we started. And hopefully people aren't looking for work on LinkedIn. So now we'll move on to the next dashboard. All right, now we're going to look at a scoreboard that could be used for a business outcome. And the business outcome that we're looking for here is deals closed. Now you can also use this template for a team performance indicator. If you have any kind of system or process that the work needs to go through several different stages or phases in order to be closed, you can use this kind of template. This is called a cumulative flow diagram. What we're going to look at is basically the health of the sales funnel or the sales pipeline. And so how we will update this chart is, let's say it's the end of March and we're looking at what happened in March. All I'm going to do is at the end of March at a consistent time, I'm going to take a snapshot of where are all the deals or the potential deals in the pipeline. And what we're looking for as a winning the game or an indicator that we're winning the game is that we're closing more deals, basically, that we're ramping up on how quickly we close deals. So let's say I go and I look at all the deals and the potential deals in the pipeline, and I see that there are 12 leads and there are 8 qualified leads. And that means that we moved one of the leads into qualified that we had previously, and then we added more as well. And let's say that still 5 are in proposal, and let's say that somehow something happened in March and we were able to close 3 out of the 4 deals that were in negotiation. That would bump us up to 7 close. Now, when you look at the chart on the right-hand side here, you would see, great, it looks like we are getting better at closing deals, at least in the most recent month. But this chart should also show you something else, is that the deals that we're closing come from this other lighter teal area, that the deals that were in a negotiation phase. So if we want to have any hope of closing more than one deal in April, that means we need to move some of these deals from proposal into the negotiation phase. And this chart just makes it really easy to see that we're going to hit a bottleneck here, or a roadblock, because we cannot move any more into close, which is ultimately our goal. The other thing is that adding more leads into the pipeline seems like a good idea, but if we're not qualifying them, if we can't get them to be qualified, or if we can't get a proposal out to those leads, then adding more leads into the system isn't helping us with our main goal, which is trying to close more deals and realize more revenue. So if your team is a team that is responsible for the entirety of the sales pipeline, maybe it's a steering committee or a C-suite, or maybe you're a small business and you're tracking your pipeline, this kind of scoreboard could be useful. The other thing it'll show you is basically how long it's taking you to get some customers or potential customers into closed. The distance between the leads that you generated here and when they get closed is how long it takes you to close deals. And so if that distance is shrinking, that means that the time it takes you to realize those or close on these leads that you're putting into the system is getting better. If it's not doing that, if it's staying flat, or if the distance continues to increase, it gets further and further away before we close those deals, then something about the pipeline is slowing you down. And what you do about putting more leads in isn't really going to do it. And probably even if you get really good at negotiating, that's probably also not going to do it. You actually need to tackle the entire system as a whole. And if your team is responsible for that, or could be responsible for that, that'll be very powerful to look at this scoreboard. All right, and now we're going to look at our third and final template. This scoreboard is the scoreboard for, can we deliver our project on time? The chart is called a burn-up chart, and what it shows is the amount of work that there is left to do in the project, which is the orange line, and how much we've already done, which is the teal line. And then it also has these dotted trend lines, which is a prediction of how long it's going to take us to finish how much of the project. Now, as far as the scoreboard's concerned and winning the game is concerned, our game is, can we deliver this project by September? And then how we read this chart is, we're going to look at, when does the amount of work completed trend intersect the amount of work that there is to do trend? Now, why it is that the project scope is constantly increasing is because if you've been on any kind of complex project, you will know that there are changes to the project, there is scope increase to the project. Even as we're working on the project, we learn things that we didn't know when we started. And so the scope of the project, most of your projects are going to be always increasing. It's not really a question of if they increase in scope, but by how much and how quickly. And so what this chart lets us show is exactly that. How quickly are we increasing the scope of the project, and how quickly are we completing it? And hopefully we're completing it more quickly than we are adding to the project, but that's not always the case. But here in this example, we're completing 34 points of scope every week, but we're adding 25 points. And so at that rate, it looks like most likely will be done sometime between December and January, which means we're not really on track to win our game by September. It's possible, but unlikely. So we've got a couple of things we can do. We can reduce the scope of the project, which is probably our best choice. And we can try to limit the amount of changes to the project by trying to put some change management in place and limit how much change or how much additional scope we're allowed to add to the project, or we could try to have the team complete the project faster. And that one usually is quite challenging to happen. So your best bet is usually trying to decrease the scope or at least limit the amount of scope changes that you're adding. Either way, whatever you do, you'll be able to plot those changes into this template here and map out and do some predictions using the geometry of the chart to give you a sense of when you are likely to finish the project. So if you'd like a walkthrough of how actually specifically to update all of the cells in this chart, please leave a comment below and we'll look into creating that for you. Thank you. If this was helpful, give us a thumbs up and subscribe for more content like this. And if you have questions about setting up a scoreboard at your business, let us know. Also, if you got a great scoreboard example, please share it with people in the comments below. Thanks very much.